Welcome back everyone. Today you are about to witness one of the most unbelievable moments ever seen on the America's Got Talent stage. This is not a singer. This is not a dancer. This is not an illusionist. This is something far rarer. A moment that left the judges frozen, the audience speechless, and even Simon Cowell questioning everything he thought he knew about intelligence, talent, and age. What happens when a child who can barely talk walks onto the biggest stage in the world and does something no adult can explain? Stay with us until the end, because this story only gets more shocking. The lights rise slowly inside the America's Got Talent theater. The audience is buzzing as usual, excited but distracted, expecting another typical audition. Terry Crews steps forward with his familiar smile and booming voice, ready to introduce the next act. He looks down at his card, pauses for a second, then looks back up at the crowd with confusion written all over his face. He clears his throat and says that the next contestant is 2 years old. Laughter ripples through the audience. Some people think it is a joke. Others assume a parent will do most of the talking. Cameras cut to the judges. Heidi Klum smiles politely. Howie Mandel raises an eyebrow. Sofia Vergara leans forward, curious but unsure. Simon Cowell, however, does not smile. He leans back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression serious and skeptical. Simon has seen thousands of acts. He has watched people claim miracles, prodigies, once-in-a-lifetime talents. And most of the time, they fall apart under pressure. A 2-year-old, in Simon's mind, cannot possibly understand the stage, the lights, or the expectations. He whispers something to Howie, clearly doubtful. Then the curtain opens. A tiny child walks out holding one parent's hand. The child is small, barely steady on their feet, wearing simple clothes and wide, curious eyes. The audience immediately melts. There is an automatic wave of applause, not for talent, but for cuteness. The child waves, unsure why everyone is clapping. Terry kneels down to the child's level and gently asks their name. The child answers softly, slightly unclear, like any toddler would. Terry smiles and asks how old they are. The child proudly holds up 2 fingers. The crowd laughs again. Simon does not laugh. Terry then turns to the parents and asks why they are here. The mother takes a deep breath and explains that their child has an unusual ability with numbers. Not just counting, not memorizing, but understanding. At this point, Simon shifts forward in his chair. The mother explains that before the age of 2, their child began recognizing patterns, solving basic equations, and reacting to numbers in ways they had never seen before. Doctors told them it was unusual. Teachers said it was impossible. Friends said they were exaggerating. Simon interrupts. He asks very directly, what exactly can a 2-year-old do that we should be watching? The father responds calmly and says, ask any math question. The audience murmurs. Simon raises an eyebrow. He looks slightly annoyed, like he has heard this before. Simon leans into his microphone and says fine. He starts simple. He asks the child to count backward from 20. The audience chuckles. The child pauses, looks at the parent, then begins counting backward clearly, without hesitation, without skipping numbers. The laughter stops. By the time the child reaches 0, the room is silent. Simon sits up straight. Howie's mouth is open. Sophia whispers something under her breath. Simon then says that could be memorization. He says it does not prove understanding. He looks directly at the child and asks a new question. He asks what is 12 plus 9. The parents freeze. The audience gasps. This is not something most preschoolers can answer. The child tilts their head, thinks for a moment, then says the correct answer. There is an explosion of sound. The audience jumps to their feet. Applause fills the theater. Terry's eyes widen in disbelief. Simon raises his hand to stop the noise. He says he is not done. The room quiets instantly. Simon then asks a question no one expects. He asks a multi-step problem. He asks what happens if you take 30, divide it into groups of 5, and then add 2 to each group. The parents look nervous. The mother's eyes fill with tears. The child looks down, quietly counting on their fingers, then looks up and gives the correct response, explaining it in broken toddler language but perfectly accurate logic. That is the moment. That is the moment Simon Cowell changes. You can see it on his face. The skepticism dissolves. The crossed arms disappear. He leans forward slowly, eyes locked on the child, not as a judge, but as a witness to something extraordinary. Simon speaks softly now. He says he has judged talent for decades. He has seen singers who change lives, performers who redefine art. But what he is seeing right now is intelligence at a level that defies explanation. He admits something rare. He admits he was wrong. The audience erupts again. Howie Mandel stands up, clapping, shaking his head. He says this is not talent, this is evolution. Sophia is emotional, saying she cannot believe what she is seeing. Heidi smiles with tears in her eyes. Simon asks one final question. He asks the child if they like numbers. The child smiles and nods. Simon smiles back. He then says something that sends chills through the room. He says if this child continues like this, the world will one day change because of them. The golden buzzer is not pressed. This is not about advancing in a competition. This is about a moment that will live forever. Simon stands up. He walks to the edge of the stage, something he rarely does. He kneels down in front of the child, looks them in the eye, and says never stop being curious. The audience is crying. The parents are overwhelmed. Terry struggles to keep his voice steady. As the family walks off stage, Simon remains standing, clapping longer than anyone else. Later backstage, Simon speaks to the camera. He says moments like this are why he continues to do this show. Not for fame, not for ratings, but for discovery, for witnessing something real. He says talent does not always sing. Sometimes it thinks. And that is the lesson of today. That brilliance has no age. Genius does not wait for permission. And sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest minds. If this story amazed you, make sure you stay connected, because the world is full of unbelievable moments just waiting to be discovered. The moment does not end when the child leaves the stage. In fact, that is where the real story begins. Backstage, the atmosphere is completely different from the usual chaos. Crew members whisper to each other. Producers stare at their monitors in disbelief. People who have worked on this show for years are quietly shaking their heads, trying to understand what they just witnessed. A 2-year-old did not just answer questions. That child understood them. Simon Cowell walks off stage slower than usual. He is deep in thought. Cameras catch him rubbing his chin, something he only does when he is genuinely processing something unexpected. A producer asks him how he feels. Simon pauses, then says something that surprises everyone. He says moments like this are rare, and they are dangerous in the best possible way, because they force you to admit how little you actually know. Meanwhile, the parents sit backstage holding their child, who is now more interested in a colorful light on the wall than the fact that millions of people just watched them perform. That contrast hits hard. The child does not know they amaze the world. They are just being themselves. A judge comes back to speak with the family. Simon himself asks if the child understands what just happened. The parents smile and say not really. They explain that at home, numbers are treated like toys. No pressure. No pushing. Just curiosity. Simon nods. He says that is exactly why this worked. Later that night, clips from the audition explode across social media. Phones light up. Videos are shared millions of times within hours. People argue in comments. Some say it must be edited. Others say the parents coached the child. Experts begin weighing in, explaining that while rare, extreme early cognitive development does exist. But Simon Cowell does not care about the arguments. The next day, during a judge's meeting, Simon brings the child up again. He tells the others that this is not about competition. This is not about winning America's Got Talent. This is about responsibility. He says when the world labels a child a genius, it can either protect them or crush them. Simon speaks from experience. He has seen child stars burn out. He has seen pressure destroy talent. He makes it clear that this child's journey must be handled carefully. When the family returns for a follow-up appearance, the audience reaction is even louder than before. People are standing before the child even walks out. Simon watches closely, not with excitement this time, but with concern. On stage, Simon does something unexpected. He tells the audience to calm down. He says we are not here to push this child to prove anything. He says tonight is not about bigger questions or harder problems. Instead, he asks the child what their favorite number is. The child smiles and answers happily. The crowd laughs warmly. Simon then asks why. The child gives a simple, innocent reason. It sounds silly, but it is perfect. Simon smiles again, this time softer. He turns to the camera and says something powerful. He says intelligence is not a performance. It is a process. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let a child be a child. The parents later reveal that they declined multiple offers after the audition. No commercials. No talk shows. No pressure. Simon supports this decision publicly, earning respect from fans around the world. In interviews, Simon explains that talent shows should not just discover ability, but protect it. He says the most impressive thing about the audition was not the math. It was the joy, the curiosity, the absence of fear. As the season continues, other acts come and go. Singers hit high notes. Dancers flip through the air. Magicians amaze crowds. But nothing quite replaces the feeling of that moment. Simon admits that long after the season ends, he still thinks about that child. He wonders what they will become. A scientist, an engineer, a teacher, or something entirely new. He says the world often rushes genius, but the best minds need time. The final shot shows the child at home, sitting on the floor, surrounded by blocks and books, counting quietly, smiling, completely unaware that they once made the most feared judge on television stand in silence. And maybe that is the most beautiful part of all. Because true brilliance does not seek applause. Time moves forward, but the memory does not fade. Weeks after the audition, Simon Cowell is sitting alone in the empty theater after a long day of filming. The lights are dim. The seats are silent. This is usually the moment when Simon leaves quickly, ready to disconnect. But this time, he stays. He stares at the stage, remembering the smallest contestant who ever stood there. He admits later that the audition changed something in him, not as a judge, but as a person. For years, Simon believed talent needed polish, pressure, and discipline. That night reminded him that the purest form of brilliance begins without any of those things. News outlets continue to talk about the child. Universities discuss early intelligence. Psychologists debate development. Parents around the world watch the clip and look at their own children differently, not to compare, but to listen more closely. Simon makes a quiet decision. He asks producers to create a private policy for young prodigies appearing on the show. Less pressure. Fewer rehearsals. More protection. No forced narratives. He does not announce this publicly. He just does it. When asked in an interview what the most powerful audition of the season was, Simon surprises everyone. He does not mention the golden buzzer moments. He does not mention standing ovations. He says it was the one where nobody expected greatness. He explains that intelligence is often loud in adults, but quiet in children. He says the child did not perform for applause. They answered questions because they were curious. That honesty stays with him. Months later, Simon receives a short handwritten note from the parents. It is not long. It does not thank him for fame. It thanks him for kindness. For kneeling down. For speaking softly. For not turning their child into a spectacle. Simon keeps the note. During the season finale, as confetti falls and the winner celebrates, Simon claps respectfully. But his mind is somewhere else. He is thinking about the child who did not need to win to matter. After the show ends, life returns to normal for the family. Morning routines. Toys on the floor. Storybooks at night. Numbers mixed with cartoons and laughter. No cameras. No pressure. The child continues to grow, learning at their own pace. Sometimes they surprise their parents. Sometimes they struggle, like any other child. And that balance is what makes it right. Simon later reflects on this in a rare emotional moment. He says talent shows are mirrors. They reflect not just performers, but society. He says that night showed the world something important. That intelligence is not always loud. That genius does not need a spotlight to exist. He says the most powerful thing the child ever did was remind adults how to be curious again. Years from now, the world may hear that name again. Or it may not. And Simon says that is perfectly fine. Because success is not always measured in trophies or headlines. Sometimes success is being allowed to grow freely. The final image that stays with Simon is not the applause. It is the quiet moment when the child looked at him, smiled, and answered a question honestly, without fear. And that is why this moment matters. Not because a 2-year-old solved math problems on a famous stage. But because, for a brief moment, the entire world stopped, listened, and believed that wonder still exists. And that belief is more powerful than any number.